All right, folks, welcome back to the new Sentinel. This is Major Ethan Graves, but just call me Sentinel. Today's topic hits close to home. We're zooming in on the Western Hemisphere's security picture. Honestly, it's gotten a lot more complicated compared to even a decade ago. You look at Democratic backsliding in a few states down south, drug cartels getting bolder, and, those migration crises just get naughtier every year. It reminds me of my captain days in the department, when, I kid you not, we started seeing cartel tactics shift right in the heartland, not just at the border. They adapt, cross those jurisdictional lines, and suddenly local cops are in way over their heads. Our strategies just gotta keep evolving, right?
Sentinel, that's hitting the nail on the head. See, when you think about the region, I'm talking the Americas as a whole, the threats are no longer contained. Transnational criminal organizations know no borders. These are not just Mexican or Colombian issues. They're affecting the whole hemisphere. And then add the likes of China, Russia, and Iran meddling, pushing different agendas. This isn't the Cold War playbook anymore. It's more like an open chessboard. You can't address security here just by looking at one country at a time. It's regional, and it needs a collective response. Plus, with democracy getting shaky in places, it becomes open season for outside actors to get a foot in the door.
Yeah, that's spot on. I mean, listen, drug trafficking ain't what it used to be. These folks are more networked, tech-savvy, and brutal. You look at those cartels running fentanyl, and you see how they link up with gangs right here in the U.S., cities you wouldn't even expect. And I'm telling y'all, it's not just about border patrol. It's about intelligence, joint task forces, the works. Transnational threats means it ain't their problem. It's ours, too. Add in those external actors, China, Russia. They see these cracks and, boy, they wedge themselves right in. It's a battlefield, just not what most folks picture when they hear that word.
The human cost can't be understated either. You see increased violence, displacement, families forced to migrate or caught in the crossfire of governments versus cartels or rival factions. Often those fleeing instability become scapegoats in political rhetoric here, but really they are victims of this tangled security web. Let's be clear, if democracy erodes anywhere in the region, all of us risk losing those protections. Malign foreign influence only makes the situation worse by exploiting these vulnerabilities, deepening divisions, and making it harder for civil society to do its work.
That's why military and diplomatic cooperation is so important now. The U.S., Canada, Mexico, we're all in this together. NORAD, OAS, those frameworks aren't just paper exercises. They let us pool brains and muscle, We're reinforcing democracy, building economic resilience, the whole package. If we want to keep our streets safe and our institutions strong, it takes everyone at the table, all right? So, speaking of outside actors, there's one in particular that's really been turning up the heat in our neighborhood. Duke Chukwuka, let's talk China.
Yes, including the dragon in the room. China's trade footprint in Latin America is huge now, second only to the U.S., and some say, in a few sectors, they're actually leading. The thing is, and I'm going to keep this simple, what you see isn't always what you get. All these investments in ports, telecom, power grids, they're not just about moving goods. These are dual-use assets. One day it's, here's your new port in Panama. Next day it's, oops, we control a logistics choke point. Take those Chinese-run container ports. Now, that's leverage, both economic and potentially military.
You're right. It's that wolf warrior playbook. They're buying into infrastructure like it's a fire sale after midnight, and nobody's asking who's holding the keys. Next thing you know, their tech, Huawei, surveillance systems, all over government buildings in places where democracy is already shaky. I saw a Senate report outlining how they basically export surveillance packages right into the hands of regimes that, well, don't put human rights first. That's kill chain stuff, not just commerce. And don't even get me started on the military training they're handing out to some of these countries. It's a slow creep, and we gotta keep our eyes wide open.
And from a humanitarian lens, this means more than just a power struggle. It has very real consequences. Authoritarian governments use those surveillance tools not just for national security, but to crack down on dissent, monitor opposition, and stifle civil society. We've seen it in Venezuela, Nicaragua, even El Salvador. I spoke with activists from the region. Many see these deals as a Faustian bargain. It buys them roads or police tech, but at what cost to freedom and rights? And of course, this unsettles the traditional influence of the US, sometimes for the worse, sometimes prompting overdue soul-searching about how aid and development should also mean investing in people, not just hardware.
Yeah, Olga's right on. China plays the long game, weaving its way into security partnerships, training, scholarships for military and police, sending over technology. That ain't always a bad thing on its face, but when you combine it with authoritarian tilt, like you said, it's a new wrinkle. This isn't just competing for contracts. It's shifting the region's whole security alignment, and that matters, because any instability here is a direct problem for the U.S., and I'd argue Canada too. Speaking of, let's get down to how all this plays out for the closest neighbor, Canada. Olga, you talked to someone interesting recently, right?
Yes, so last month I sat down with a Canadian security official for a piece I was working on. She described it as a balancing act. Canada has deep economic links to China, but at the same time, there's this acknowledgement that too much openness poses real risks. Especially with things like Huawei and potential tech transfer, Canada's been tightening the screws a bit, but it's a tough choice. One slip, and you risk either undermining critical relationships or leaving the door open for exploitation by outside powers. She said, "Every week there's a new briefing, a new risk, and not enough easy answers."
That's the reality so many folks don't see. Canada walks a tightrope. Keep trade flowing. Don't close the door on the world, but also keep that back door shut to cyber threats and intellectual property theft. From what I've read, Canada's tightened up on the Huawei issue, but always with an eye on not damaging the commercial links that make their economy hum. You get any friction points with the US over this, Olga?
Definitely some, but honestly, even when the approaches differ, the shared values come through. Both countries stress democracy, rule of law, protecting critical infrastructure. There's that constant dialogue, NORAD meetings, OAS dialogues, intelligence sharing. Sometimes Canada is a little more cautious or nuanced, but fundamentally, the partnership remains strong. It's the multilateral process that keeps everyone pulling in the same direction.
You know, I always tell people, Canada may hesitate now and then, but when the chips are down, they're right next to us in the trench. Whether it's cyber, tech transfer, or good old boots on the ground stuff. The OAS, NORAD, those aren't just acronyms. They're alliances that run deep. There's always room for squabbles, but at the end of the day, we're defending the same flag, the same freedom.
Absolutely. And with all these threats getting smarter and nastier, you gotta adapt together. Western Hemisphere security's a moving target. It'll take all of us, pooling intel, keeping a watchful eye, and holding that democratic line. Well, folks, that's all we've got time for today on the New Sentinel. Thanks for the deep dive, as always. Olga, Chukwuka, Duke, good insights all around.
Appreciate you, Sentinel, Duke, Olga. Always a pleasure tackling these big topics with y'all. Listeners, don't forget, the world keeps turning, and we'll be back next time with more to unpack.
Thanks, everyone. Remember, behind every headline are real lives affected by the choices we discuss. Let's never lose sight of that. Until next time.
All right, crew, that's a wrap. Stay vigilant, stay strong. Catch y'all on the next briefing.